Picture this. You want to get as far from the ocean as physically possible. Not just inland, I mean truly as far as any human being can stand on dry land and still be the farthest they have ever been from salt water. Where do you go? Most people would guess somewhere in the middle of Africa, or maybe the heart of Asia, or the American Midwest. And honestly, most people would be partially right, but the actual answer is one specific point on Earth, a set of coordinates sitting in the middle of a desert in northwestern China, and the story of how scientists figured that out and what is actually happening there right now is genuinely one of the strangest geographic stories you have never heard. We're talking about a concept called the pole of inaccessibility. Before you zone out on the terminology, let me explain what that actually means, because it is simpler than it sounds. A pole of inaccessibility is simply the point on any given landmass that is furthest from the nearest coastline. Think of it as the dead center of a continent. It is not the geographic center. It is the point that is maximally, mathematically far from any ocean in every direction. Every continent has one. The one that sits at the absolute extreme, further than any other point on dry land on this entire planet, is the Eurasian Pole of Inaccessibility, tucked into a remote valley in China's Xinjiang province, barely a few kilometers from the Kazakhstan border. How far is it from the nearest ocean? 2,645 kilometers. That is 1,644 miles. To put that in terms that actually land, the distance from New York City to Denver, Colorado is roughly the same. Instead of crossing the American Midwest, you would be crossing the emptiest, driest, most geographically isolated stretch of land on Earth. No coast in any direction, no sea breeze, no maritime humidity softening the air, just pure landlocked continental interior, cut off from every ocean on the planet by mountain ranges, deserts, and the sheer overwhelming size of the Eurasian landmass. But here's what I find genuinely wild. Scientists actually got the location wrong for years. The original coordinates everyone cited placed the pole at roughly 46 degrees north, 86 degrees east, deep in the Zhou-Sotuan-Ellison Desert. That was the accepted answer for decades. And then in 2007, a study by researchers Garcia Castellanos and Lombardo dropped a bombshell. Their paper pointed out a critical error. Previous calculations had failed to count the Gulf of Ob, a massive inlet in Russia, as part of the Arctic Ocean. Once you correct for that, the pole shifts entirely. The actual candidates are now 2 points, still in Xinjiang, still in the middle of nowhere, but not quite where everyone thought for all those years. Even the most remote point on Earth turned out to be a little off. Now, the closest major city to any of these candidate points is Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang. Urumqi itself is extraordinary in a way that has nothing to do with the coordinates. It's a city of over 4 million people, and it officially holds the Guinness World Record for being the most remote city from any sea on the planet, about 2,500 kilometers from the nearest coastline. Surrounded by the Gurban-Tungut Desert to the north and the Taklamakan Desert to the south, it sits in the foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains. The temperatures there can hit 42 degrees Celsius in summer and drop to negative 41 degrees Celsius in winter. In a single day, the swing can be more than 20 degrees. You could wake up in a jacket and be sweating through a t-shirt by noon. This is what the farthest point from the ocean feels like in the nearest city: extreme, brutal, relentless. The name Urumqi itself means beautiful pasture in the Mongolian language, which honestly feels like the most optimistic geographic branding in human history given what surrounds it. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The region around the pole isn't just remote, it's one of the most politically contentious areas on the planet right now. Xinjiang, whose name literally means new frontier in Chinese, a name given by the Qing dynasty in the 19th century, is home to the Uyghur people, a Turkic ethnic group with their own language, culture, and predominantly Muslim faith. The area sits at what was once the heart of the ancient Silk Road, that legendary overland trade route connecting China to the Mediterranean, to Rome, to the Islamic caliphates. For centuries, this most remote corner of the world was actually a crossroads. Caravans carrying silk, spices, glass, and gold passing through the very terrain that surrounds the furthest point from any ocean. The isolation was geographic, not cultural. People have been moving through here for thousands of years, and then you look at what's happening there today, and it gets complicated in ways that are hard to process. This same region has become one of the most heavily discussed human rights situations of the 21st century, with the Chinese government's treatment of the Uyghur population drawing international condemnation from dozens of governments and organizations worldwide. The most remote point from the ocean is also one of the most watched patches of land on the planet right now. Geography and geopolitics are colliding in a desert. It's a lot. But if the land-based story is complicated, the mirror image of the EPIA, its oceanic equivalent, might actually be even more surreal. Geographers asked what is the furthest point on land from any ocean, and they also asked the reverse. What is the furthest point in the ocean from any land? It is called Point Nemo. Named after Jules Verne's Captain Nemo, Latin for no one, it sits in the South Pacific Ocean at roughly 48 degrees south, 123 degrees west. It is 2,688 kilometers from the nearest land in every direction. That land consists of 3 tiny, mostly uninhabited islands scattered across the South Pacific. That is it. Those are your nearest neighbors. And Point Nemo was not discovered the way you discover a mountain or a river. It was calculated. In 1992, a Croatian-Canadian survey engineer named Hrvoje Lukatela used geospatial software to identify the single point in the world's oceans equidistant from the 3 nearest coastlines. He did it with math, not boots on the ground, because there is no ground. Just water in every direction for over 2,000 kilometers. What happens at Point Nemo? Mostly nothing. The ocean there is almost dead. It sits inside the South Pacific Gyre, a massive circular current that acts as a barrier, preventing nutrient-rich water from flowing into the area. No nutrients means almost no marine life. No shipping routes pass through it. No air traffic crosses it regularly. It is, by almost every metric, the most nothing place on Earth. Except for one detail that is almost too good to be real. Because of Point Nemo's extreme remoteness from any inhabited land, space agencies around the world, including NASA, use it as a spacecraft cemetery. When satellites, rocket stages, and space stations reach the end of their operational lives, engineers calculate a re-entry trajectory designed to have the debris splash down near Point Nemo. The floor of the ocean there is littered with the remains of hundreds of spacecraft, including parts of the Soviet Mir space station, and the International Space Station itself is scheduled to be deorbited and crash there sometime before 2030. The most peaceful, empty, dead patch of ocean on Earth is also the universe's largest graveyard for human technology. I don't know if that's poetic or deeply unsettling, but I can't stop thinking about it. Here's the detail that genuinely stops people cold when they hear it. Because no ships regularly travel to Point Nemo and no aircraft fly over it, the closest human beings to that spot at any given moment are often not on Earth at all. They're the astronauts aboard the International Space Station, orbiting 408 kilometers directly above. The most remote point in the ocean is closer to people floating in orbit than to any person standing on land. Sit with this coincidence for a second. The Eurasian pole of inaccessibility is roughly 2,645 kilometers from the nearest coast. Point Nemo is 2,688 kilometers from the nearest land. They are, by wild geographic coincidence, almost exactly the same distance from their respective boundaries. The most landlocked point on Earth and the most oceanic point on Earth are geometric twins, equally isolated in completely opposite ways, mirroring each other across half a planet. And the whole time you have been watching this video, You have been surrounded by ocean on every side, you just could not see it. Even in the most landlocked state, the ocean is never more than about 1,600 kilometers away. That feels like a lot until you realize there are people standing in Xinjiang for whom the nearest wave is twice that distance. Drop a comment. Which one would feel more isolating to you? The pole in the desert or Point Nemo? See you in the next one.